Hey, what is up, fellow app builders? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are doing well. I've been receiving a lot of good feedback and a lot of good tips and suggestions for what I should be making for my next video tutorials. And it's really helpful for me, so thank you guys for that. All right, moving on. So let's go ahead and wrap up on this slide in menu that we've been building up in our YouTube application and kind of fill out the rest of what the menu should be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and go into Xcode and show you guys where we left off last time by running the code in our Xcode IDE here. So I'm going to run this application and I'm going to bring this simulator to the middle. And so here I'm going to hit the menu on the top right, and we have a couple of options here, but upon clicking onto these options, we want to dismiss this menu and then bring it into a new view controller. So what I mean is we want the behavior of this menu button to handle this click on the menu. For example, the settings button will dismiss, and then it brings another controller with the setting at the very top of the title. So I'm not going to build out an entire settings view controller, but essentially we just know that we received the right setting, and then we just push a view controller that is related to that setting onto the navigational stack. And that is what we want to build today. Let me go ahead and shrink the simulator up here and go back to Xcode. Okay, so that's the functionality that we want to build today. And before we go into that, I want to kind of introduce a new segment in our videos, and it's going to be the question of the day kind of segment-ish thing. And the question for today is what is the kind of definition of lazily instantiating our variables inside of Swift? So that's the question. What does it mean to write the word lazy inside of Swift? So make sure to stick around for the answer to that question. It's actually really helpful, and it's going to help us in our video today. Okay, having said that, let's go ahead and look at what we need to do inside of settings controller right here. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up and then scroll down. And so whenever I hit this menu on the very top right, I want to actually respond to one of these settings collection cells here. And I'm going to do that by typing in, let's see, did select item at index path here. And in here, I can actually get the setting for my menu. And the way I do that is to just type in let setting equal settings right there, index path dot item. And then I'm just going to simply print out the setting name for kind of demonstration purposes for now. So I'm going to run the application, and then it's going to launch into the simulator and click this more button, and we click the setting. And inside the console, we just get the print out of the exact setting name. So that's how we know we've clicked onto the proper setting. All right, and now we actually have to handle the dismissing of this menu. So when I click this, I would expect this whole menu to dismiss down, right? So what I can do is I can actually do a couple of different things here. I can call handle dismiss. So for example, if I just call handle, let's see, handle dismiss, no, handle dismiss right there. If I call that, it's going to execute this handle dismiss code, which does the exact same thing of clicking up here. So this gets a handle dismiss call, and then if I click this, it gets handle dismiss. So that's what that does, right? Now I'm going to show you what I can do here. I can actually copy and paste all of this code. I'm going to copy that dismiss code and paste that down here, and we get the exact same code, right? And every time you copy and paste, you should be pretty scared of a lot of bugs that will occur in your code. So I'm going to show you the wrong way of doing it first, and then show you how to fix it, right? Now, inside of this animation here, we actually need to know when this menu is completely dismissed, and then we'll present the new view controller. In other words, we'll click here, get the menu, and then upon the completion of dismissal, we present a new view controller. And we do that by simply using a animate with a completion block. In other words, I'll say UI view animate with let's see, duration. So I'm gonna use this spring damping method right here because it gives me a little animation curve that I can use. For duration, I'll put 0.5, delay is 0, damping is 1, spring velocity is 1. Options, we'll use curve, ease out. And for animations, we'll hit enter. For completion, we'll hit enter. Here we'll use a completed boolean like that, and then we'll execute some code upon completion. Now the bit that goes inside of animations is the actual dismissal code. So I'm going to cut this from here, paste that here, and I believe this needs to be 0.5. Okay, now that we have that, I'm going to delete this code here, and I'm going to run this code and show you what happens with the dismissal. So upon clicking one of these settings here, it's going to hit that, dismiss down, and then nothing. So that's pretty good. If you notice, if I click here, the dismiss looks a little different because we're now using two different styles of animation, right? So I'm going to fix that a little bit later. And so first, let's see what we can do. Well, wouldn't it be nice if I can call something like this inside of home controller? Then we'll go to home controller, right? And I'm going to go into this handle more function, and this function calls the settings launcher, show settings, and then it presents the entire menu onto the screen. Now, wouldn't it be nice if I could actually present a controller onto the screen somehow? So I'm going to show you how this works inside of code. First, let's say I want to push a view controller onto the stack. Well, we do that by just creating for example, a dummy, let's call it a dummy settings view controller like this. And this is just a base UI view controller class, and we'll say navigation controller, push view controller, and we'll use this dummy setting view controller with animation of true. So running this, we're going to push this blank view controller onto the navigation stack when we hit this more button here. So more gives this dummy view controller with a black background. There's also this little blue tint back button, right? So we're going to fix that. We're going to fix this display here. But the more important part is I would like to execute this code every time I hit one of those settings button inside of, let's see, where am I at? Inside of this menu here. And so I am going to actually create a new function called show controller. Let's see, show controller for settings here. I'm going to cut this entire bit of code, paste that in here, and I'm going to call show controller for settings and run that code. So every time I hit the more button, we get the exact same functionality. We'll just use this function call instead. So we hit that, and we get our dummy controller being shown onto the navigational stack, right? So now that I have this show controller for settings function, I'm going to go to settings launcher, and here's my question. So when we select the menu item, wouldn't it be nice if we can call something like home controller dot show controller for settings and presents the new view controller upon completion of the dismissal? Well, it would be nice, and let me tell you how to do that. So above, inside of settings launcher, if we just create this var home controller and home controller like that. So upon doing that, we can actually call home controller dot show controller now. But let's see. One thing we have to fix is we have to actually make this an optional, because if we don't make it an optional, for example, this home controller means that it doesn't know whether or not it can be nil. So that's why we kind of include that question mark. I might go into that a little more detail if you guys really want to know. Anyways, we have home controller now, so we can call self home controller, and because it's an optional, we need to include that question mark, and we can actually run this application now. And when it's completely dismissing the menu, it'll call this bit of code. So I'm gonna hit that. Let's see, what do we need to do? So let's see. Okay, let's go back to home controller and fix the handle more function. And I'm going to remove this, let's see, remove show controller for settings, and then uncomment that and run the application now. So the more button will launch the settings menu, and then we want to click here, and then you notice how nothing happens, right? So the reason why nothing happens is because I'm going to show you exactly why. When I hit one of these buttons, that this breakpoint here will be called when the settings is completely dismissed. So we get a little glimpse as to what is currently in memory here. So if I open up self, and self home controller is actually nil, like what it says here. And we need to actually make it non-nil, right? And how do we make it non-nil? Well, it's very easy if we go back to home controller and we look at this settings launcher equals this new instance of settings launcher. And here is the answer to kind of the question of the day, right? The reason why it's nil is because we haven't set settings launcher.homeController equals self. So if I'm doing that and running the application now, I'm going to click one of those settings and it's going to hit the breakpoint. I'm going to show you that home controller on settings launcher is actually non-nil. So let's go back to here. I'm going to hit a breakpoint there again. And let's see, clicking on a setting, we get access to the breakpoint, and the home controller is actually not nil anymore, kind of represented by this memory address right there. And then upon hitting the continue button, we actually execute this function here, and then it shows this dummy view controller. So pretty straightforward, I hope. And here is what we are going to do to fix this line here. And here's the problem that I want to address. Every time I click on this more button right here, it actually sets home controller to self. While it is okay, we are constantly doing it every time on this settings launcher instance. And we only need to really do it once because home controller is always going to be kind of the same thing, but it's being executed every single time. So let's go ahead and fix that by using lazy var instantiation. So I'm going to show you how to kind of do this. If we say let settings launcher be a type settings launcher like this, and set it equal to this block of code here, and we say let launcher equals settings launcher as a new instance of one of these launcher guys, and then we'll just return this launcher here. And now we get a new instance of this launcher object as settings launcher. So wouldn't it be nice if I can just say launcher.homeController equals self in here instead of setting it out here? Well, it would be nice, but we can't do this yet because we haven't actually typed this out as a lazy var like this. And now that we have a lazy var, we can have access to self. And so let me just delete this line here and run the application to show you kind of how this works inside of code. So I'm gonna click here, and then we hit one of these guys, and then we get the dummy view controller being presented. So that's the proof that all of this works. So what does this really mean? Well, let's see. So inside of a lazy var, what this means is that we're not actually executing this code every time a view controller or anytime a class is being instantiated. And what I mean is, so let's take a look at what this UI view controller is actually doing. So if I command click into here, and I think if I type Control-6, I can get one of these init methods here. So all of these init methods call some kind of constructor and returns like the instance of itself, right? And so if I go back to this bit of code, this entire home controller is being constructed inside of app delegate. And it's this code right here. And we use this to set up a app without the storyboard, right? So I'm going to show you kind of what this is doing right now. I'm going to run the application. So I'm going to hit run. It's going to do a fresh run. I'll set a breakpoint in there. So notice how this breakpoint was not executed when the whole controller showed. And it only gets executed upon hitting this more button, because we will call settings launcher.show settings. And then so I hit this and it calls this block here. and then it gives me the launcher, and then it sets home controller to self, which is good, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm gonna hit continue, and it shows the menu. I'm gonna dismiss it again. So the next time I hit this more button, you would kind of expect it to kind of call this code again, right? So I'm gonna hit this more button, but you notice that the code is not being called, and that's because anytime you do a lazy var instantiation, the code that's inside of this block here only gets called once if this variable is nil. So the very first time it returns this settings launcher, and this settings launcher variable is no longer nil. That means that the second time you call this, it no longer calls this code, which makes everything perfect, and all of this execution right here only occurs once inside our app. So that is kind of the trick to how all of this works. All right, maybe I went into too much detail on that, but hopefully that helps you guys understand how to execute your code cleanly without kind of duplicating unnecessary lines of execution. Okay, going back to settings launcher. So how do we, let's see, so upon dismissal, how do we know how to show the right controller? For example, we want to hit settings, and then we want to show this settings controller, right? So let's do this here. I am going to, let's see, I'm going to do this. So I'm going to go to collection view, did select item at index. I'm going to comment out and get this setting here, cut that, remove this print statement because we don't need it anymore. And I'm going to paste the setting right here, and we get the setting inside of settings. So I'm going to call this self.settings, and we get that. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we actually want to pass this setting variable all the way into show controller for settings. So I'm gonna go to home controller, and I'm gonna type in setting here, and then set it to be a variable of setting. So this is this is a minor nitpick here, but I'm gonna remove that S right there because the proper naming is to say setting, setting, setting. You don't want to include plurals if you don't have to. And here I'll call show controller for settings. And we're gonna run this application now and see what we have. So I need to remove this S over here. And now we are good to go. So running this application now, we will actually go back to the home controller. And I'm gonna click here, hit this, hit one of these settings, hits the breakpoint, and then we get our setting variable inside of our debugger. So it's settings and settings. So I'm gonna very quickly show you guys how to fix this controller to make it look a little bit more presentable here. So dummy settings view controller, navigation item, dot title, we'll fix the title to say, let's see, setting dot name right here. And I'm gonna fix this back button to make it look white by just saying dummy settings view controller. And actually, I need to say navigation controller dot nav bar right there. Tint color equals UI color dot white color. That'll also fix the blue back button to be presented in a white color instead. So click here, gets there. Let's see, let's use terms and privacy policy. Gives me the correct title. And the reason why this is showing black is because the default color for a view controller's view is a color of black. So let's change it to white right there. And let's see, view. So this needs to say dot background color. And run this guy, and hopefully we'll get the correct presentation of our dummy view controller. So settings, gives me settings. And the last bit I want to fix is the navigation title. I want it to be white. So how do we do that? Well, we execute some code. Let's see, show controller for setting. We actually say navigation controller nav bar. Let's see, title text attributes, and this needs to be a dictionary specified with NS foreground color attribute name, UI color, let's see, color dot white color, and that will fix the title text color. So I'm click this, perhaps hit switch account, and then we get switch account in white. So that's how you would change the title color, and also the rest of the UI elements that belong to a new view controller. So that's pretty good. And I want to show you guys one more thing here before I kind of wrap it up today. And I'll go back to the settings launcher. So remember what happens when we call did select. We animate it out and then we call show settings, right? So what happens when I click on cancel right here? Well, cancel gives me this cancel view controller, and that's not what we want. So when we hit cancel, we actually want to just dismiss it without showing a view controller. So the way to do that is to say if setting.name is not equal to cancel, like that, then we'll actually show a controller setting, right? It only makes sense to only dismiss upon cancel. So let's hit that and cancel, and it doesn't show us a new view controller. So that's pretty good. And the other thing I kind of want to talk about, but I'm not going to show you guys exactly how to do it in this video because we're running a little bit long on time. And I want to kind of present you guys a question as to what will happen when I change the actual name of the cancel button now. Let's say I got some feedback from my boss and we actually want to say cancel and dismiss for the actual settings title. So this is our settings array that contains the actual setting object, some bit more. And now it says cancel and dismiss. So if I cancel and dismiss, it's going to actually bring up that new controller. So I'm going to just undo that code. And so the question is, how do we fix it so that we don't have to use a string like this, which is pretty unsafe, and still keep the functionality of not showing a controller upon hitting cancel? So the answer to that question is use Enums. And I'm going to go over how to use Enums in Swift in another video, perhaps a little later this week. All right. And so now that we have the cancel kind of caught right there, I want to ask you another question here. So whenever we call handle dismiss, whenever we click this black area, we call this other bit of dismissal code where we just animate the menu off the screen. And then when we call did select, we also do a very similar animation, but it's not exactly the same. So now we've introduced two layers or two different types of animations. And which one do we want? And which one do we want to keep? And do we want to make our code a little safer in terms of code duplication that we don't want? So here is the trick to fixing all of this, right? I don't want to keep two large chunks of code that do the exact same thing here, right? So the way to do this is whenever I call did select item at index path, I'm just going to call handle dismiss, and then I'll execute all of this dismissal code. And then when I want to actually dismiss it, I'm going to call that entire block of code instead of just this regular dismiss. I'm going to paste that entire code that we had, and now we're missing this setting variable because we can't get it from the index path, because inside of handle dismiss, we don't have access to setting path. So I'm going to let a variable in handle dismiss called setting, and then I'm going to remove this. I'm actually going to cut it and paste it back into this bit of code. So we still keep the setting here, and handle dismiss will actually take in that setting. So I'm going to run the code now, and we have cleaned up our dismissal code to only have one style of animation. So hit this and hit terms and privacy, and we get our terms and privacy. Hitting cancel, we'll do this, and then we don't get a cancel view controller. But you guys know there's always a but. What happens when we now dismiss this code, and then we dismiss it here, and then we see this blank view controller? Why does that happen? Well, because we call dismiss upon hitting this blank black space, we're actually calling this bit of code right here with a empty variable inside of settings. So I'm going to put a breakpoint there. And so hit this black area, and it's going to hit this breakpoint. So what is setting? Setting is actually this UI tap gesture. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on why it's this UI tap gesture, but essentially these methods get called with a tab gesture by default. And so by the time it reaches here, see here, setting name is actually this setting name, which is blank for a UI tap gesture. So that is what happens. And so if we include setting.name not equal this blank string, and right there, let's see, setting. If we do that check, in addition to the cancel, the setting here, so if I click there, it no longer presents that blank dummy view controller. So that gives us send feedback, gives us that, and cancel gives us that. Nothing happens. Switch account does this. So that's kind of perfect for my taste. We've eliminated the duplication of the dismiss code by just calling the same code in our view controller. Makes your code a lot cleaner, and you don't need to actually have tons of animation code that you don't need to constantly duplicate everywhere. So that's a very good programming tip that I hope you guys are able to pick up from my videos. And let's see, home controller, and that looks good, that looks good, and we went over the lazy bar. So that's pretty good and about where I want to take you guys for today. All right, that about wraps it up for today's video. Hope you guys learned a lot of good stuff about lazy variable instantiations, how to kind of use the debugger a little bit, and most importantly of all, at least to me, is how to clean up your code so that you don't continuously copy and paste and duplicate code unnecessarily inside of your projects. So make sure to give a thumbs up if you've enjoyed today's video, and also hit subscribe. It does help out the channel a lot. And finally, the project for this menu implementation is available on my website in the description link below, so you can download that along with all of the image assets if you really want to see how it's done. And finally, if you want to hit me up on Twitter, give me a shout out or a holler. You can follow me at Build That App on Twitter as well, and message me with whatever you want to ask. And hopefully I'll be able to have some time to answer your questions. Perhaps one day I'll do a Twitter question video, perhaps. So that about wraps it up for today. Hope you guys keep on coding and getting better. Each and every day is how I kind of got a little better as well. So that's it. Have a good day, and bye-bye.